Alright guys, welcome back to Grow the Earth. I just wanted to address a question, and it's actually a multitude of questions that I've seen in different Facebook groups, some that I'm a part of, some that I actually admin, but the majority of the questions that I see are usually from new gardeners, and it is either, what am I doing wrong? What should I know starting out? You know, show me pictures of your stuff, that kind of thing. And it got me to thinking, and I was thinking about, you know, my first year that I started gardening, what were some things that if someone told me, that someone gave me from an experienced gardener, would have helped me avoid some of the pitfalls and some of the mistakes that I've made over the years. And I've gone through and I've made a list of different things that have helped me, that I've learned over the years, either through other people or from my own experience. And it answers a lot of the questions that I've seen. And one of those is going to be, when you're laying out your beds, you want to make sure that you're leaving enough space in between your beds to put a wheelbarrow down through. Especially if you're doing raised beds, because once they're there, they're pretty much there. It's a lot more work to try and move a raised bed than it is just to put it in the spot you need it to in the first place. And as you can see, we don't have enough room between some of these beds to have a wheelbarrow go down through them. And this is very helpful, especially since the method we use to garden with, in that we bring in compost and things like that to add to our beds, and we have difficulty. We have to go down through one or two different alleyways instead of being able to go down in between each one and just dump the soil where we need it. We have to kind of do a move around, and a lot more shoveling. It's a lot more work now. So that's our first one. The second one is actually when we first built this garden, we made one big, large planting area, put a bunch of dirt in it, and we tried to grow in a raised bed like we were growing in ground. And it amounted to a lot of wasted space, a lot of compacted soil, and a lot of just unused space that we could have used better had we gone with smaller raised beds. And I've corrected that, and that's why most of my beds are only about 3 foot wide. Now, you can make them as long as you want, and some people correct this by making a keyhole garden or things like that. But the narrower planting areas give you the ability to reach in from either side, and you don't have to walk in your beds, because walking in your beds compacts your soil and it makes it harder for plants to come up in. The plants don't want to grow in compacted soil. They want to grow in soil that is loose and fluffy. Especially certain vegetables like your carrots and things like that are root vegetables. If you have compacted soil, they will not grow. So, smaller beds is the second thing. Now, another thing that I have kind of learned over the years from my own experience that would have helped me a long time ago is doing a no-till garden. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't disturb the soil. This simply means that you don't use a tiller of some sort, and you don't completely flip the beds over. Originally, when I built these raised beds, I put cardboard in the bottom of them and put good soil in them and all that nice stuff. And for the first year, or the first 6 months or so, everything was wonderful. Everything was great. But then I made a mistake. I took a tiller in, because the original soil that we brought in was not as fluffy as I thought it should be. And I took a tiller and I tilled my raised beds. Now, I got the desired effect. I got the effect of it being a fluffier, looser soil. But what I also ended up doing was I tilled through that layer of cardboard that was keeping the weeds and the grass out of my beds, and I tilled that grass seed and those grass nodules up into my growing area. And believe me, once you get grass or weeds into your growing bed, it is a pain to get them back out, especially if it's sedge nut grass. That stuff is horrible, and it is almost impossible to get out. Through the years of me doing a no-till bed, we have severely limited the amount of nut sedge grass that we have in the beds and eliminated a lot of the weeds, but it has been a battle to get to this point. So doing a no-till garden is something that would have helped me out just a few years ago. Now, of course, if you're doing in-ground gardening, that may not apply to you. In-ground gardening, I would suggest more of doing a hill gardening, healing the soil instead of necessarily digging straight into the ground. Now, the fourth thing that I wish someone had told me years ago, and this is just something we did recently to our garden, was put in wood chips in between our raised beds. This has been a game changer for us. It has severely dropped the maintenance in our garden. It's dropped our weed load that ends up in our beds just tremendously. Plus, you don't get those nasty muddy walkways. Having the chips between the raised bed has just been an awesome thing, and I wish I would have done it years and years ago. Another thing I wish somebody would have told me years ago is not all soil is good soil. Now, this applies to if you're buying it from a nursery or if you're buying it in bags at the store. All soil is not good soil. There are some nurseries or some garden supply places or some lawn care places that the soil you get is very low quality and is not necessarily good for growing garden vegetables in. And that the tip that I wish someone would have told me was to do a soil test. There were many years that I grew in soil that I thought was good, that looked good, but whenever I tested the soil, it was absolutely horrible. And it explained why I had poor results. So my suggestion would be, unless you're experienced enough in your years that you understand what your garden needs every year because of, it's just what you've learned that they need, I would highly suggest that you get a soil test. Now, there's a couple of places you can get these. You can get a soil test off of Amazon, at your local big box stores. Most garden centers have them. Or you can actually go through your county extension office, and they usually have a master gardener that can come out and do a laboratory soil test on your soil. Now, these two different soil tests are going to give you different things. Your soil test that you can buy off of Amazon or in your local big box stores is going to be just a basic soil test. It's going to give you about where your nitrogen is, about where your potassium is, and so forth. But it's not going to let you know how much you should add. When you go through your extension office, the soil test they're going to do is going to be a lot more extensive. It's going to give you a lot more information, and it's going to give you a look into your soil in more depth. And a lot of times at the end of this report, it's going to give you a suggestion of what you should add to your soil to bring it up to its peak optimum growing capacity. So definitely a soil test would be something that I wish I had known about years ago when I was growing gardens. Now, another thing that I wish someone had told me years ago was about your zone and how it affects your plant times. Now, I know when you look on the back of a packet of seeds, you have your zones, and it has a general area of when you should plant that certain vegetable. Now, in a lot of cases, you can follow those to pretty much the T, and everything will work out great for you. But you have certain things that you'll find over the years that are going to grow better at an earlier time of year or that you can actually plant and grow outside of those suggested times because of your particular climate of where you're at. One of the things is just like our cold hardy vegetables that we're growing right now in January. You know, cabbage and cauliflower and so forth. A lot of the people up north grow these in the spring because they won't survive their harsh winters. And you can physically grow these during the summer, but the bugs will eat you out of house and home on these things, and they will not usually make it because of the amount of bugs that are drawn to those particular vegetables. So we grow them during the winter, and we get beautiful heads of cabbage and lettuce and cauliflower because we don't freeze enough to really hurt them, and they just continue to grow and grow and grow straight through until we harvest them. Now, this is Zone 9A where we're at, and you may find that you have a particular climate where you're located, or maybe how your garden is located within your yard, that allows windbreaks to where in certain areas you're able to grow vegetables that wouldn't grow in another area because it has its own kind of little microclimate there. Now, these are things that you're going to figure out over time, but this is something that if someone told me that your grow times on the back of a package of seed were not hard and fast times, it would have helped me out a lot. And things like knowing your first and last frost date is indispensable knowledge because that gives you so many different things about your growing times. That's going to tell you when is the very last day that you're really going to want to leave in anything from summer if you're planning on planting a fall crop. It's going to let you know when you need to start your seedlings for your summer crops in so that you can put them in after the last frost date. So it's something that goes along with your zone, but it's very, very good information to have. Now, something else that would have benefited me quite a bit is to be patient. When you're a new garden, you're all excited, you're wanting to get out there and grow, and you plant stuff, and you get discouraged because it's not growing as fast as you think it should. Well, God decides how fast something grows. If you are doing everything else right, if you've got your soil right, if you're watering correctly, and you're just not seeing the growth that you expect, more than likely it's you. You're expecting too much. These gardens that we grow are severely affected by weather, by, so many different things. And if we get a little impatient and we either go back and we plant again or we just rip out the plants and just give up, it's not doing us any good. So being patient is something that I've learned over the years that has allowed me to grow better gardens than I ever would have if I had been impatient and either replanting multiple times because they weren't sprouting as fast as I thought, or just simply getting impatient with the fact that they're not growing as fast as I thought they should have and thinking something is wrong, and either just coming back and throwing fertilizer on them because they don't seem to be growing fast, or doing multiple soil test kits, or just any number of other things. Usually the plant knows best about when it's supposed to grow, when it's not supposed to grow, when it's supposed to flower, and when it's not supposed to flower. Now again, some of these things can be affected by your soil quality and a whole slew of other things, but if you're doing all those things right, it's just that the plant is not ready. Now the last thing that I'll say, and this is something that I've started doing within my own garden, and this is where you discover things. And it's by experimenting, by trying to grow different things at different times of year, by trying to grow things together, by your spacing of your plants, and by just different varieties. Don't be afraid to experiment. Most of us that are growing a garden are not growing a garden necessarily because we're surviving off of what we grow. Most of us are growing a garden either because we want to eliminate all the chemicals that we're eating. We want to teach our kids a lesson. You know, we want to show our children where our food comes from. Or we just simply want the enjoyment of growing our own food and having fresh fruits and vegetables. So that means that we have time and space and so forth to where we can experiment with certain things with different varieties and so forth. And we may discover something that we never ever liked, but because it came out of our garden or just because it's a different variety, that we like it. So, you know, experiment. This is your space to relax and to enjoy, so do it. Enjoy yourself with it, and don't necessarily get bogged down in trying to be the most productive garden in the world, and just enjoy your space. You know, experiment with it. Do things that may not make sense. Now, within a certain bubble, okay, we'll say that, but don't be afraid to experiment with your garden. You know, now, on the other hand, if this is what you're doing to survive off of and that you eat 90% of your food out of your garden, by all means, continue to grow. If you're at that point to where you're eating 90% out of your garden, more than likely you're an experienced gardener and you're not learning anything watching this video. But for all the others who are growing out of it just for pure pleasure or just because of wanting to eat healthier or, you know, any number of other things, don't be afraid to experiment in your garden. You know, God will grow the things in our garden. You know, here in our garden, just this year, we had problems getting our fall garden to germinate. We had to go back and replant multiple times, and it was a trial. But we have a beautiful garden again this fall because we were either patient enough to wait on the plant to do what it needed to do, or we were persevering and kept going back and refining what we were doing in order to get our plants to germinate and to come to fruition. So guys, I hope this video helped you out. If you're watching this on YouTube, go and check out my Rumble account, go check out my TikTok and my Instagram account. There's information all over the place that I'm putting out there that is not actually in all one place. And you know, I want to help you guys grow your garden the best that you can, and gathering all the information you can is the best way that I've found to do it. As always, I ask you to pray over your family, pray over your garden, and have a great day.